This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com. This show is brought to you by IndyWrestling.us and IndyWrestling.network for your independent wrestling entertainment. Just pro wrestling news podcast. No filler, no pop-ups. Production services by Sidekick Media Services. And listeners like you, supporting us at patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show. Hey guys, it is the Indy Mayhem Show, the show where we talk with people in and around independent professional wrestling. I'm Mike Sorg at Sorgatron on the Twitter here in the Sorgatron Media Studios in Pittsburgh, PA. And we got a great conversation. It's one of our regular catch-ups today. So very excited to see what's going on with that. But first, please go check out everything at WrestlingMayhemShow.com and IndyWrestling.us. You can find this and other great podcasts. And of course, many of the people featured on this show and titles we're going to talk about today are featured on IndyWrestling.us, whether that be many of them on the VODs, digital downloads, some DVDs, and of course on the Indie Wrestling Network. A lot of the titles are featured there as well. But today I have with us something that's brand new, the brand new old stuff, I guess we can call it today. Joe Dombrowski is with us. That's your new moniker, hey. I guess. Brand new old stuff. Joe Dombrowski on the line with us today.
That fits me. Listen, I'm an old soul, but I feel younger every day. So that fits me so much. I love that I'm semi-regular here at this point. It's like I always find new ways to sneak my name in the headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't even gotten into my college admission scandal, my racketeering business, my Guatemalan sweatshop. There's so much more to get into, but for now, I guess we can stick to wrestling.
So
thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming back on, and of course, we always have some good chats on here. Although the last one I was going through the old list, and I found the How to Catch a Predator one we did with Jimmy DeMarco from
the anniversary
back in the
show.
Days.
That was a special anniversary.
That was
Out
a special
all the
anniversary
in my life.
That's right.
Most.
That's right. The time that you almost got kicked off of cable TV. But I
wouldn't have rather done it with anybody else but Jimmy DeMarco.
You can
man.
find
People
that
still talk about that. Chris LaRusso cannot go 3 minutes around me without bringing that up.
Hey man, you and of course you can check out all of that in the archives here with the Indie Mayhem Show, whether on the YouTubes or on the podcast. But Joe, the biggest project, in a while for you, first of all, and not that you have been lacking on projects. I know. And disclaimer, I usually do a lot of the final tweaking and edits, I guess, for some of the projects that you do, especially as compilations.
Control, some disc authoring, some nuts and bolts.
Man, if you need your wrestling video on 1997 technology, I'm your guy apparently. But that's where we're at. But
now that's your catchphrase.
That's my catchphrase. So you've released a compilation here of the Brian Pillman Memorial shows with new content. Of course, this is with you've been doing from the Heartland DVDs, at least 2 volumes of it, and this is a little bit of that partnership going on down there. Tell us a little bit about what. Okay, for people that maybe don't know the enormity of the Brian Pillman Memorial shows. Our younger crew out there, maybe half the wrestlers we talk to, fill them in. Like, why is this so important?
So, if anybody doesn't know about Brian Pillman, he was massively innovative throughout the 1990s. He really helped usher back in the junior heavyweight style of pro wrestling, the cruiserweights, light heavyweights, with his matches against Jushin Liger and Brad Armstrong in the early 90s. And this was a precursor to guys like Dean Malenko and Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. Brian was really on the forefront of being a quote-unquote smaller guy in mainstream U.S. wrestling. And then you fast forward a couple of years to the Hollywood Blondes with Steve Austin and the incredible tag team that was. And then a few years from that, Brian becomes the loose cannon, and he's breaking the fourth wall, and he is got everybody in the business convinced that he's insane, and nobody knows what is fact and what's fantasy anymore. And Brian, if anybody doesn't know about him in depth, I suggest they do a deep dive, not just on YouTube, not just on these DVDs, on the Dark Side of the Ring show, but really, really research Brian, especially if you're a young wrestler in the business. Brian passed October 5th, 1997, and each of the 4 subsequent years after that, Les Thatcher would put together the Brian Pillman Memorial events to pay tribute, to raise money, to honor his memory. Now, Les Thatcher is a world-renowned trainer who at one point around this time period ran a WWE developmental system, which is what we profile in wrestling from the Heartland. So much like an NXT trainer or coach is today, Les was the infancy of that. And guys like Charlie Haas and Nigel McGuinness and BJ Whitmer and Shark Boy and Jamie Noble and Shannon Moore and Umaga and Eddie Guerrero and John Cena and so many guys either were based there or passed through there on their way to the main roster. And Les was able to use his contacts and the respect he has in this industry to get the WWF, WCW, and ECW to all agree to let their talent appear on the same event. And this is in the middle of the Monday Night Ratings War. It's in the middle of very, very fierce competition between all sides. All the offices seem to have some general disdain for one another. It's not like today where you see, AEW and NWA and New Japan and all these different places under one umbrella. Back then, that was unheard of. But Les made it happen. It was one of the only times that happened in that era. So you have these, this locker room full of some of the best in the whole industry during the hottest time the industry had ever seen. And it's all there. Everybody volunteered their time, worked for free to pay homage and pay tribute to Brian Pillman. And there you see Les in the ring right now with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who at this point of this clip, 4 weeks before this, Steve Austin won the world title in the main event of WrestleMania. And now he's appearing on essentially an independent event for free because that's what Brian meant to him and meant to his career, meant to him personally. So 25 years ago, obviously there was no internet, there was no streaming service, there was very, very limited distribution. So these shows never really saw the light of day outside of maybe some merchandise tables in Cincinnati. So to finally be able to bring these mythical shows to an audience that have heard about them for 2 decades is very, very special. And, probably one of the biggest pieces of history that up to this point had been largely uncovered.
No, absolutely, and it's pretty incredible to see this. I mean, this was at the height. We're talking what 98 through 2001. These shows, and it was the height of the Monday Night Wars into, and beyond there. And it's really great to see this coming on and seeing some names. Referee was that Brian Hildebrand, even in this shot that I'm showing right now.
Yeah, Brian Hildebrand, who was battling stomach cancer at that point in time, but still wanted to appear on this event and insisted that he refereed this event. Les tells a great story in the set about how Brian was scheduled to referee Dr. Tom Pritchard and Terry Taylor, kind of a slower paced Legends match. And for those that don't know about Brian Hildebrand, he refereed in WCW, he refereed in Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He was actually in the same training class up here in Pennsylvania with Mick Foley and Shane Douglas for Dominic DeNucci at his school. So tough as nails and just well respected by everybody that was in the ring with him or knew him. And when it came time for that main event, it was Malenko, Benoit, Rey Mysterio Jr., and Conan. So they were going to go hard. But Brian gets in the ring and Les asks him, are you sure you can do this? And Brian says, well, if I can't, you can carry me to the back, right? And that just shows his passion and shows just how much this meant to him to be part of that moment and to be in the ring. And that was probably one of the last times he was in a ring because unfortunately he passed himself not too long after. But one of the most touching moments on this set is when Les introduces Brian Hildebrand to the ring and just the huge ovation he got. You could see the emotion in his eyes, the water kind of forming, not tears so much, but he was welling up a little bit because that emotion was just palpable in that building at that point. And it's just a small example of what made that event so special. You know, you look at guys like Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero and Matt and Jeff Hardy and Edge and Christian and Mark Henry and Diamond Dallas Page and, you know, Al Snow and Raven and Steve Corino and Lita and all these guys and girls, D'Lo. I could go on and on. Shark Boy. They just made this so special because Brian was special to them and it mattered to them.
No, absolutely. You know, it was the best of the best at the time from the looks of it, from a lot of this footage. And of course, I mean, people notice this is 1998, but it certainly doesn't look like WrestleMania. You know, I don't know how much of us even recall what independent wrestling may have looked like in 1998. I think we're in 1999 in this clip here with looks like Just Incredible and Raven going at it, and yeah, there's a table and blood, classic ECW fashion, by the way. But you know, these are all, and I know, you know, we seeing the Heartland film, you know, we're seeing a little bit of fuzz there at the bottom. These are all, of course, kind of I don't know remaster. We don't entirely have the capabilities to do that, but at least like restored and preserved and digitized through a process like that. And I know that's a process you've been working on several years with a lot of this footage.
Yeah, I mean, preserved is the best way to put it. I mean, and the impetus of all this started with just my relationship with Les, because I have known Les for over 15 years at this point. In 2005, I was 19 years old. And I started to realize I'd been in the business like 2+ years already. I realized the opportunities weren't going to come to me. I had to go chase them. So what I did is I looked online and I made a list of all the top indie wrestling power players that I hadn't met yet, from like the tri-state area, promoters, trainers, bookers, whoever. And I got like the top 25, and I emailed all of them. Only 4 wrote back, and Les was one of them. And we've been in touch ever since. When Les was booking an event out in Los Angeles a number of years ago, he needed an announcer. He called me. Whenever I need, you know, input or feedback or critique, I could always send him a match that I called. But through conversation one day, he had mentioned he still has the vast majority of the Heartland content in storage. And of course, the light bulb goes off above my head. I would love to see it, but I mean, you see here and there, you see OVW stuff and FCW and NXT and things of that nature, but you don't see the Heartland footage out there. And I started to go through it in 2015, I think at this point it was. And, you know, it took 4 years after that before we got Heartland 1 on the market. It just became a labor of love, going through 75 or 100 different VHS tapes and cataloging and going through, you know, what is in which quality, and you know, what's a 2-camera shoot versus a 1-camera shoot, and what has kind of some contemporary names that people would know today, and what has maybe more of the indie guys that are lost to time, and just categorizing all that. But the Pillman tapes were in that storage box. At least some of them were. And I asked Les, like, are these on the table, or are the Pillman shows fair game? And he said they were not, because the rights rested with the Brian Pillman estate. And Brian's family obviously had been very distanced from pro wrestling for quite some time, justifiably so. A couple of years after that, Brian Jr. gets in the business, and Brian Jr. trains with Lance Storm. And I have a couple mutual friends that also trained with Lance Storm, and I met Brian in Meadville a few years ago.
Yeah, I remember when he was there. I was just recently recounting. I'm like, who's this guy with the Stone Cold hat? And they're like, that's Brian Pillman Jr. I'm like, bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I didn't believe it was him. You know, I'm like, there's a junior. Like, what's going on? You know?
Yeah, it's just such a chance encounter and just out of nowhere. But that's where I met him. And once he finished training with Lance, we were able to develop a bit of a relationship. You know, me running events in Cleveland and him living in Cincinnati at the time, it gave us the opportunity to do some business together. And one of, if not the really first great pay-per-view match Brian had was on one of my welterweight wrestling events against Gregory Iron.
Yeah.
And once we had a chemistry and we had a trust and a business relationship, I pitched to him, listen, I've got these tapes, and I think that a lot of people would be excited to see them, but I don't want to do it without you. What do you say? And he was all for it. And as you saw just a minute ago in the clip of Jericho, he was very helpful as well, as far as producing some of our extra material and just being very, very supportive and spreading the word. And even to this day, he's getting the word out and helping things out. And he's down in Jacksonville right now. He just gave a copy to Matt Hardy. There's a picture of that on Matt's social media. Brian told me today, he texted me to tell me that he gave a copy to Dean Malenko, which is awesome. That event, I mean, it's special to Dean Malenko because that's where Dean first announced publicly that he was retiring at the end of the year. So that was a banner event for Dean too. But it all went from there. And then after that came the process of, okay, I've got 3 copies of this. I've got no copies of this. I need to find this. This copy A has the best video, but copy B has the best audio. I need to dub the audio into the video. I need to, I need to edit in this entrance because this part's clipped. And just to give everybody the most complete version possible, I was combining basically like clipped footage with like an edited full event with like the raw footage, and all together it makes one full event.
Wow.
For 2000, there was a lot of like little nitty gritty work with that. Some of the stuff with 2001 I didn't need to touch because it was as good as it was going to get.
Yeah.
And I tell a lot of the people out there that listen, I do interviews. If you want HD 4K, this is not the release for you.
No.
Don't jump on that. But if you want to see a part of history, and maybe see what, I can't even say what independent wrestling was like because this show is so far above and beyond that.
Yeah.
But maybe from a production standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, and just to experience the authenticity of what it is, because we don't change things, we don't blur things out, we don't cut people or things out. Everybody at home can make their decision on who and what they watch. I know certain things are a little controversial with some of the talent that does appear, but and we made it a point to not include them in any of the external advertising,
right?
Because we don't want to trigger anybody. But once you have the copy, I think you can make that conscious decision if you're comfortable watching those particular people or not. And if you're not, that's completely fine. There's still 13 or 14 other hours that you can enjoy. But at the end of the day, the only thing that we that we add on to this is the commentary track with Les and I, just to give you some of the backstory and call some of the action, because what blew my mind is that 3 of these 4 shows never had an official commentary team. Because that's just how primitive it was back then. 98 did in post because it wound up being a local TV special where Les and Dean Sharkboy had done it. But 99, 2000, 2001 was just ambient crowd noise. And it was a perfect time to get Les behind a mic to tell some stories, share some experiences, evaluate some talent. And the coolest thing about that commentary to me is that so many different examples in that show, you get genuine reactions from Les because he's seeing something for the first time. And you know as well as I do, just being around it, if you're running a show and you have time to watch it, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
You're putting out fires at the ticket counter, at the concession stand, in the locker room, in the parking lot. You always have somewhere to be and something to do. So, and especially Les back then when he's running whatever 2-3 events weekly, he's doing WWF developmental. There's no time to stop and smell the roses. So a lot of this stuff, you get just a genuine just reaction of shock or laughter or whatever it is, because this is something Les didn't even know was on the show. And you're getting it in real time, almost like you're there live. And it's not manufactured. It's genuine. And it was so cool to be next to him as he finally had a chance to kind of sit back and soak in his creation in a way that he never had a chance to do 20 years ago.
I mean, that's a kind of a shocking thing, like how many promoters, even on the level that he was at, probably see barely any of his actual product, right? Because he's too busy producing it.
Exactly. I mean, and just from my experiences, like I enjoy what I do, but I can't step back and enjoy an event in the moment. I have to go back and watch it later.
Yeah.
So, and I'm fortunate I have the luxury most of the time to do that, but some people don't. But again, to have Les have a chance to do that with me, and for me to be able to sit there and call a Billy Kidman match, or to call a Chris Jericho match, or I didn't call it Jericho match, it's a bad example, but like call John Cena versus Randy Orton,
Mm-hmm.
which was a pre-show match in 2001. That was the afternoon bonus card.
Yeah.
Had John Cena, and it wasn't even the main event of the bonus card. That's how early in. I think Randy was 21, and maybe John was 23 or 4, or something like that. And just to find little gems like that, and to be able to say that you were a part of that history, even if it was 20 years later, it's humbling, and it's just overwhelming, and I love it.
It's fantastic. So we mentioned, a lot about the footage, of course, but there's more than just, the 4 events are on this. But there's a lot of bonus love, like work from down to like there's this. It was a what was it? It was the radio. Was it the radio presentation of? Was it the first show or the second? I think it was the first show.
Second
Right?
show,
Second
yeah.
show. That's right. It was 99.
Well, Les had a weekly radio show,
Yeah.
devoted to wrestling in the Cincinnati market, and they did a live remote from
Mm-hmm.
Pillman 99, and you can see some of the guys on the screen, and it's cool too because they're so relaxed and out of character. You can just hear Mick Foley, Al Snow, D'Lo Brown, Terry Taylor just ribbing each other.
Is that an unmasked Rey Mysterio from the WCW days?
Exactly. Yeah. And they're doing commentary over some of the matches.
Yeah.
They're having a little fun with some of the matches, and they're doing inside jokes. Mick Foley at one point, like the cruiserweights are running long in their match, and Mick makes a joke about Jack Lanza tugging on his tie on the entranceway, which is so inside that nobody would have gotten that in 1999. I don't think anybody gets that today, but just the fact that was on mainstream local market radio back in the day,
in the Cincinnati area, right?
Yeah, so, in the Cincinnati market, and then it was, I think, 3 or 4 days after that event, there was a WWE pay-per-view. I mean, so it just it speaks to the fact that, again, these guys had so tough schedules, breakneck pace, but they came on their day off to do something cool and fun. And I'm really happy that we, one of the clips on that radio is on that radio spot is some of the auction highlights that unfortunately we don't have video of. But Ric Flair donated one of his practically priceless robes to be auctioned off, with the proceeds going to the family. And the first thing Rick does is he lays down the opening bid himself and offers to buy his own robe back. And the audience members are actually bidding against Rick for his own robe. And I thought that was such a cool touch, and so cool to do. And it shows how giving Rick is as well.
Yeah. I mean, you never see, most people haven't seen a lot of this roster or a Ric Flair at a indie show level kind of things. Even when you see him on the indie shows now, like it's not like this, right?
Right.
Like he's a special guest and his little, as far as the indie show Pomp and Circumstance or something like that. But it's like, it's that fun, what you love about the indie shows here. So that's great. So we mentioned, so on top of that, we're starting to get into the extras, but there's also some new material. We saw a little bit of the footage there with Jericho and Pillman, if you're with us on the video version of this. But of course, a lot of people wearing AEW shirts. I'm going to point out Christian Cage there, for instance. I've made the comment. I was like, hey, there's a lot of interviews, and the booth they're in looks familiar if you watch BTE. So, but that's great though, right? It's a lot of fun, really appreciate that part about it. But yeah, there's a lot of new interviews, a lot of new content around this. Can you speak a little bit about that process? Of course, Brian Pillman being down there in Jacksonville, or all around, he's made a lot of these, contacts as well, and he's conducting most of these new interviews, right?
A fair number of them, yeah.
Yeah.
The original plan, because I mean, there's so many guys who work these events that they're still out there on the scene, and as I was compiling the footage, I thought to myself, what can we do to make this not just, not just a presentation of the old footage. We need to get the story behind the story, because to me, it's not just a wrestling event. There's a whole aura and a whole mystique to the Brian Pillman Memorial shows, and we were able to talk to Les extensively. And that one of the bonus features is Les and Brian Jr. reunited after 20 years to share their memories. But I wanted to get the perspective of what was going on inside the locker room because again, you've got WWF, WCW, ECW, the same place, the same time, and you know there was a camaraderie there. I mean, I don't think the boys ever hated the boys. It was all the offices that were at each other's throats. But at the same time, there's a competitive rivalry there of wanting to outshine the other. And, there's just interesting bedfellows. I mean, Shane Douglas talks about the fact that that was the first time he had seen um, Guerrero, Malenko, Benoit, and Saturn since they had left WCW 3 months earlier for WWF. And there was some controversy there because the internet stated that, well, Shane Douglas thought he was going to leave with them. So there was a little bit of, I guess, shortness between them. But at the end of the day, they all realized they were there for the right reason, and they were all very professional with one another from every account that they've heard. But I wanted to hear from those guys. So originally, Brian Jr.'s plan and a nice plan was okay. Let's hit up a WrestleCon and get a bunch of these guys in one weekend, and then COVID hit, and all that was out the window. So we had to be a little more inventive, and I grabbed everybody that I could that came into contact around my neck of the woods, like Shane Douglas and Al Snow, and being in Knoxville with Les, I was able to get Dr. Tom Pritchard at a school. Mm-hmm. We got Shark Boy on Skype. We had Bill DeMott and Nick Dinsmore sending things in. I had a friend, Ben Scheinberg, who referees down in Texas and used to work for Impact Wrestling. Got us Mark Henry and Justin Credible and Charlie Haas. And Brian Jr. got DDP when he was at the Accountability Crib, and got the AEW talents down in Jacksonville: Christian, Matt Hardy, Chris Jericho, and Pepper Parks, the Blade. And it was so cool. It was challenging in the sense that because I wasn't there for so many of the interviews, and in many cases we're just kind of catching people in the middle of something. I didn't have the luxury of saying like, "Hey, can you give me 2 hours of your time and I'll buy you this steak dinner," or whatever the case is. A lot of times is in and out, give me 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I had to have just a few set general questions that I thought were encapsulating enough where it would cover every base. And editing that together was interesting because I started to notice some of the same beats being hit by a lot of the guys, and a lot of the same kind of topics correlating. And I thought, okay, we've got a narrative here. We've got actually a story to tell. And I'm very proud of how it turned out. I'm not going to say it's as slick or as polished as a WWE release, but I don't need it to be. It can be a little bit raw, because these are raw emotions. There are F-bombs and there are emotions that are shared, and there's things get a little heavy at a point or two. But it's everybody, again, a demonstration of, even 20 years later, what these events and what Brian meant to them, the fact that they're more than willing to donate their time and speak so earnestly and from the heart.
Absolutely. So some really good pieces in there. Definitely check it out. It's on IndyWrestling.us and the Pro Wrestling Library.com on digital version, of course, DVD over Joe-Dombrowski.com. Speaking of the DVD, I have to appreciate what you did for the artwork here that I have to bring up, because I saw it and I was like, oh wait, this looks familiar. Oh no, I know what this is. Actually, I think one of these pieces is hanging on my wall over there in the entrance. But our buddy Franklin up in Erie does some great caricatures. I believe I can't remember if I had a chance to sit down with him I think we did do an interview with him. But this DVD cover. How do you get around having a picture of Stone Cold Steve Austin on your DVD cover? Illustrated, of course. This is great. I love this. So there's illustrations of, like I say, there's DDP. I say Chris Jericho there, the Hardys and Lita. I'm just stating for you guys on audio here. There's Brian Pillman, of course, Mankind, Edge and Christian. Al Snow with Head, like all kinds of great. Shark Boy. This is a cool DVD cover going on.
I think it's something that really jumps out at you if you're,
Yeah.
passing by a merchandise table or anything like that. Really, the impetus of it was I wanted to stay true to the original Pillman Memorial Show graphics. If you notice, the shirt I'm wearing now is from Brian Pillman 1999, and every year there was a different illustration of Brian Pillman involved in the logo. And I wanted to hold true to that this year for the 20th anniversary. I wanted to have a drawing of Brian Sr. involved as the centerpiece. But once you do that and you realize you have Steve Austin and Mick Foley and Eddie Guerrero and Chris Jericho and all these guys involved, you can't not mention them and can't not spotlight them. So in my head, it became just sort of this collage, this like menagerie of animation. And Franklin O'Neill was the first guy I thought of as far as being able to do that. And most of the guys on the front and back cover, as I knock myself over, most of these guys on the front and back cover already existed. The pictures were already they were already kind of on the market, and all I had to do was I guess, for lack of a better term, license them. And we actually are selling an 11x17 poster / art print of all that as well, and a portion of that goes back to Franklin. So if you want to support his work, I would say by all means jump on that. But yeah, Franklin was great to work with, and he was very accommodating, and I thought he captured what I wanted perfectly. And again, already with just what he had in existence for the most part. And it beat me telling my graphics guy that I need a copyright-free picture of Steve Austin for the height of his career, because that would have been a very awkward late-night conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And while we're talking about kind of unsung heroes, I want to shout out Kevin Bennett, too, from the Buffalo area, who's wrestled down into Erie and had a couple dabs in the Pittsburgh area. But he's a rapper and an audio engineer and a DJ, and some of his original beats he permitted to be used for some of the background music for our end credits and for some of our special features.
Nice.
So 8th Avenue Beats and Kevin Bennett Music, I think, are the two YouTube addresses to check out. I think Kevin is an immensely talented individual. I remember him when he was just a young kid coming up and didn't really have that identity. So to see him now, kind of blossom, for lack of a better term, these past few years as a personality is great. I think, his best work in wrestling and in music is still ahead of him. And I think he'll be making waves sooner than later.
Absolutely. So, of course, a lot of great things going on with that, but also you've been getting around a little bit. I've been hearing the stories because I know our buddy Rob, who does camera for a lot of our productions here at IndyWrestling.us, has been hitting the road with you and going to AAW in Chicago. How are we all ended up on Chicago these days? Like, how did this happen?
Chicago is one of the best wrestling cities in the world.
Oh,
honestly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's New York, it's Toronto, it's Chicago, it's maybe Greensboro. England has to be thrown in there.
The town of England.
Yeah, the town of England.
The town of England.
England, United Kingdom.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I've seen it with Warrior Wrestling in my stint back in September with them, and of course I've seen the stuff that he's bringing back, and he's telling me he's like, yeah. So I always wanted to film Leo Rush and Laredo Kid, and then I got them in the same match. like great stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and the cool thing about AAW is it's always been kind of that place in Chicago for the talent that's right on the cusp. If you look through their past few years, you'll see Karrion Kross, and you'll see MJF, and the Lucha Brothers, and the Young Bucks, and Sammy Guevara, and just all these guys, Darby Allin, all these guys that have done incredible things since Shane Strickland, on such a wide scale. And they've been around for 18 years, I think, at this point, 17, 18, 19 years. And they've kind of always been that stronghold there. And obviously with the pandemic being what it was, every promotion that was lucky enough to be able to run couldn't really spread its wings and fly.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a 10% capacity limit, 15%, whatever. And AEW still did some fantastic shows there in the latter half of 2020 with a capacity of at most 50 people. But now that things are kind of lifting a little bit, AEW starting to spread that wingspan out, and you're getting more of these outside, you know, guys that have that panache to them, like Leo Rush versus Laredo Kid and ACH, and I think Chris Statlander's on her way back, and Allison Kay, and of course Ace Austin and Hakeem Zane and Jake Something, all of these great talents, Madman Fulton, Braden Lee is on his way up. All these talents that are doing great things. Freddie Ahai, who had the match against Mance Warner on the most recent pay-per-view. And if you guys want to check that out, it's AAW Take No Prisoners on Fight TV, FITE. The replay's up now, and it really is something for everybody. I love the energy. I love the locker room. I love the environment. Tyler Vols is a great announcer to work with because he's passionate, he's energetic, he knows his history, he takes it seriously. I think we bounce off of each other great, and it's very quickly become a home away from home because of just the level of talent. Makes me feel very comfortable because you're only as good as who and what you're working with, and they give me a lot of quality stuff to play with.
Oh, absolutely. Another fun new venture that both of us have been involved in a little bit is actually Conquest, Pro Wrestling Conquest. I keep saying Conquest is the first word, but Pro Wrestling Conquest down in Charleston, West Virginia. I know there's a show coming up just a week from when this is going to broadcast as well. But that's another one that's been kind of really taken off and having a great batch of talent happening down there too.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody that's kind of being displayed on the screen, from Mance Warner to the main event to Facade to Ace Austin. It's such a kind of melting pot of the best Pittsburgh, the best West Virginia, the best Ohio, the best kind of traveling indie stars all under one roof, and you get a wild and a physical environment. I mean, we're in West Virginia, anything goes, right? It can get pretty nutty, but it's all it's all under the auspices of a very hungry and dedicated management team that want to build this into something special. And every event, I feel them getting a little bit better and a little bit better and a little better. And now that through IndyWrestling.us and through ProWrestlingLibrary.com, people can actually live and relive these shows and see what we can feel. I think that growth is only going to continue, and I'm looking forward to this big event on the 21st and that wild tag team main event. The Stampede match. What are they calling it?
I can't remember off the top of my head here, but yeah,
it's gonna be chaos. It's gonna be violent though.
Was it a Charleston Stampede? Maybe, I don't know.
Everybody should show up to watch Jock Sampson get beat up, but don't tell him I said.
Absolutely, no. It's a good time. Good time down there, and some of the wildest stuff that I've filmed in a good while here. But although I haven't filmed much in a good while at a high extent, right? But no, a lot of fun down there. And then again, when they started booting back up in November, like they brought it, and they've been. I think they said like 6 or 8 states were represented there last time at that show, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, they're getting fans that are traveling from all over, and that's without a particularly strong internet presence. So shows that word of mouth is doing a lot, and that shows that people are really into this product. And again, I think if you're into violence, if you're into athleticism, if you're into traditional wrestling, if you're into just any different facet, there's something for everybody on those events. And again, every event they'll find kind of a little kink in the armor to tweak and fix, and they come back better and smarter every time.
I was amazed. I had no idea until I interviewed Derek with the company here on this show a couple months ago. I had no idea that they had like pretty much zero wrestling knowledge going into their shows, and I think they just had their 8th show. So like that.
And that's something I wouldn't recommend.
No, no, absolutely not.
I wouldn't suggest.
Uh,
That's lightning in a bottle,
it
and I think
is
that's testament to being a student of the game and listening to the right people
right,
and good instincts.
right,
They're not doing this just for play fun time or to treat humans like action figures. They
right.
actually have a business sense, a plan, a vision, and a way to execute that vision. And 98.6 of the promoters that get in without experience, at least if not more, don't have that at all, and they're one and done, or they stick around long enough to become a black mark on the business. But Conquest is lightning in a bottle. If you try to recreate it in any other city with any other people,
Yeah,
I don't know that it would work, but it's working here, and it's not just working; it's flourishing, it's thriving, it's getting bigger.
absolutely. I think I walked in their 4th show, and and again, like it was like, there's always weird things with indie shows, right? But it was just like I had no idea that these guys were so fresh, and that was their 4th show,
Yeah.
flat, right? Like I thought they were partnering with somebody else in the area, something like that. And I think there are some partnerships and helping out with like some other promotions, it seemed, but still, like even that, like that it's a really cool that story that's happening with them there and how they're growing, and
That's such a
you
big
know,
compliment
oh
too.
yeah,
It's like if you're a wrestler and people ask, "Well, how long have you been wrestling?" What, 6 months? What? No, I would have said 10 years. I mean,
mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm,
kind of the same way with them, where you don't realize how new they are, and that makes you think like, okay, how good are they gonna get? And that's what's exciting to me about this journey, because I just love being along for the ride and seeing how much it can grow and where we can take this.
yeah, it's a little bit like we're kind of sticking around to be like, I want to see I want to see what happens with these guys, because I don't,
Yeah.
because it's been like unpredictable in the great ways down there. So
In the best way possible.
oh yeah, absolutely. So, and that's what you like to see. I mean, you with your promotions that you've been hands on in the booking side of things, to promotions that both of us have been, where we're just kind of the hired production help at that point. It is kind of like, what where can it's been interesting to see that path for a lot of them, right? So but that's been really cool. So well, Joe, of course, and like I say, Pro Wrestling Conquest, the Brian Pillman Memorial Show at joe-dombrowski.com, pillmanshow.com, Pro Wrestling Library.com. I almost said somebody else's site. And IndyWrestling.us. I'm sure there's some other places, or a Crazy Joe's merch table near you.
Yeah, I'll be on the road. If you live in Chicago or Charleston, you know where to find me now after this interview.
Yes, yes, and hopefully we'll get merch tables in the near future in Pennsylvania. So
Fingers crossed. Fingers
it
crossed.
is
Any day now.
missed. It has been
It,
missed.
even if you can't get a merch table, you know what? You find me in a parking lot. I'll have some of my bag. We'll make a little deal.
I've been considering opening the DVD trunk at shows myself. So
You could do worse.
taking pre-orders. Yeah, I'm gonna pre-order a DVD from a guy in the parking lot. That's at an independent wrestling show. That's good.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Maybe I got a nice graphic standee or something beside my Ford Escape. So. Well, Joe, it's always a great conversation with you. Great to catch up, and good to see. Like, there's a lot of buzz around this project. I think it's really cool that you took a great part of history, something that I've always heard about, over these 20 years, and now I can put eyes on it, and a lot of people are doing so now. So that's really awesome.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the kind words. And now I go back to relentlessly nonstop running off discs.
There you
The disc
go.
burner has been running in the other room the entire time. If I am awake and home, I am making DVDs. Literally, I'm carrying the burner
Yes,
from room to room at this point.
absolutely.
I'm just trying to keep up. So thank you, everybody. We are catching up though. If you order now, you'll have your stuff shipped out in well under a week at this point. So we're getting there. But PillmanShow.com, Joe _Dombrowski on the Twitter. Thanks for the support. thanks for everything. And thank you for this platform here on the Indy Mayhem Show.
There you go. And please go check out everything going on IndyWrestling.us, Indy Mayhem Show. Subscribe to the podcast. You can also subscribe to the Wrestling Mayhem Show super feed. You'll see whenever an Indy Mayhem show may come up. I know we're getting a little wonky with our schedules lately, but as wrestling builds back up here, you're sure that we're going to spin back up too. And I'll also say there is also rumblings about a return of the Ronnie Nicole Sunday sessions. If you did enjoy those, please stay tuned. We'll probably introduce that on this feed as well when those come back. So those are in the planning stages as well. Thank you, everybody. Until next time, please support indie wrestling. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.